The story of the book of Samuel isn't just about kings, battles, or heroes. It's about how faith shapes the future. Hannah lived in a small village in Israel with her husband Elkanah. Elkanah loved Hannah very much, but there was one thing that made Hannah very sad. She couldn't have any children. Back in those times, having children was seen as a great blessing, and Hannah felt like she was missing out on God's blessings. To make things worse, Elkanah had another wife, Peninnah, who had many children. Peninnah teased Hannah about this and made her feel terrible. One year, when the family went to the temple to offer sacrifices, Peninnah's mean words made Hannah cry so much she couldn't even eat. Elkanah tried to comfort her. "Hannah, why are you crying? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" But Hannah couldn't stop thinking about her longing for a child. Hannah went to the temple and prayed with all her heart. She cried and whispered, "Lord Almighty, if you look at my misery and give me a son, I will give him back to you. He will serve you all his life." As she prayed, the priest Eli saw her. But since Hannah's lips were moving silently, Eli thought she was drunk. He said, "How long will you keep drinking?" "Stop it!" Hannah quickly explained, "I'm not drunk. I'm just deeply troubled and pouring out my heart to God." Eli realized his mistake and said kindly, "Go in peace, and may God grant your request." Hannah felt hopeful after this and went home. Soon God answered her prayer, and she had a baby boy. She named him Samuel, which means heard by God. When Samuel was still very young, Hannah took him to the temple to fulfill her promise. She brought sacrifices and said to Eli, "I prayed for this child, and God gave him to me. Now I'm giving him back to the Lord. He will serve him all his life." Hannah wasn't sad to leave Samuel because she trusted that he would grow up close to God. Each year she visited him and brought him a little robe she made herself. Samuel grew up learning from Eli and serving in the temple. One night, when Samuel was just a boy, he was lying in bed near the Ark of the Covenant. Suddenly he heard a voice calling, "Samuel! Samuel!" Samuel jumped up and ran to Eli saying, "Here I am. You called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." This happened 3 times. Finally, Eli realized it was God calling Samuel. He told Samuel, "The next time you hear the voice say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So when God called again, Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." God gave Samuel a message about Eli's family and the future of Israel. Samuel was scared to tell Eli, but Eli insisted. When Samuel told him, Eli accepted it, saying, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." From that day, Samuel became a prophet, and God's words never failed to come true through him. Everyone in Israel knew Samuel was chosen by God. The Israelites were at war with the Philistines, who were fierce and powerful enemies. The 2 armies gathered at a place called Ebenezer, and when the battle began, the Philistines defeated the Israelites. Thousands of Israelite soldiers were killed, and the people were devastated. Why did we lose? They wondered. Some of the elders had an idea. Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant to the battlefield. If we have the Ark with us, God will surely help us win. The Ark of the Covenant was a sacred chest that represented God's presence. It was kept in the tabernacle and contained the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments. The Israelites believed the Ark had great power. Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli brought the ark to the battlefield. When the ark arrived, the Israelites shouted so loudly that the ground shook. The Philistines heard the noise and were afraid. "What's happening?" they asked. "The Israelites have brought their God into the camp. This is the God who defeated the Egyptians. We're doomed." But the Philistine leaders said, "Be brave. Fight like men, or we'll become their slaves." The battle began again, and despite having the ark, the Israelites lost. Hophni and Phinehas were killed, and worst of all, the Philistines captured the ark. When a messenger brought the news back to Shiloh, Eli was sitting by the road, waiting. The messenger said, "Israel has lost the battle. Hophni and Phinehas are dead, and the Ark of the Covenant has been captured." Eli was so shocked that he fell backward off his chair. He was very old and heavy, and when he fell, he broke his neck and died. He had been Israel's judge for 40 years. The Philistines took the ark to Ashdod, one of their cities, and placed it in the temple of their god, Dagon. Dagon was a statue that the Philistines worshipped. They thought having the ark in their temple would show their god's power. But the next morning, something strange happened. Dagon's statue had fallen face down in front of the ark. The Philistines set the statue back up, but the following morning, it had fallen again, and this time, its head and hands were broken off. Only the body remained. "What's happening?" the Philistines wondered. Then, a terrible sickness spread through Ashdod. People broke out in boils, and many died. The people said, "We can't keep the ark here. It's causing all these disasters." The Philistines moved the ark to another city, Gath, but the same thing happened. People got sick, and many died. Terrified, they sent the ark to Ekron, but the people there cried out, "Don't bring it here! It will kill us all!" Finally, the Philistines realized they had to return the ark to Israel. They called their priests and asked, "What should we do?" The priest said, "Send the ark back with a guilt offering. Make golden models of the boils and rats that have afflicted you and place them in the ark. This will show respect to the God of Israel." The Philistines placed the ark on a cart pulled by 2 cows. The cows had never been yoked before, but they walked straight toward the Israelite town of Beth Shemesh, mooing all the way. The Philistine leaders followed at a distance to make sure it arrived safely. When the people of Beth Shemesh saw the ark, they were overjoyed. They took the cart apart and used the wood to make a fire for a sacrifice to God. The cows were offered as a burnt offering. But some people treated the ark carelessly and looked inside it, which was forbidden. God struck them down as a warning to respect His holiness. The people of Beth Shemesh then sent the ark to Kiriath Jearim, where it stayed for many years. After the Ark of the Covenant returned to Israel, it stayed in Kiriath Jearim for many years. During this time, the Israelites felt distant from God because of their disobedience. They began to realize that their troubles, defeat in battle, the loss of the ark, and their suffering came from turning away from God. Samuel, now a grown man and a respected prophet, spoke to the people. "If you want to return to the Lord with all your heart, get rid of your foreign gods and serve Him only. Then He will save you from your enemies, the Philistines." The people listened to Samuel. They destroyed their idols and prayed to God for forgiveness. Samuel gathered everyone at a place called Mizpah to pray and offer sacrifices to the Lord. While the Israelites were gathered at Mizpah, the Philistines saw this as an opportunity to attack. The Israelites were frightened and said to Samuel, "Don't stop praying to the Lord for us, so He will save us." Samuel offered a lamb as a burnt offering and cried out to God. Just as the Philistines advanced, God sent a loud thunderstorm that threw their army into confusion. The Israelites charged after them and won a great victory. Samuel set up a large stone as a memorial and called it Ebenezer, which means stone of help. He said, "The Lord has helped us this far." From that time on, the Philistines left Israel alone as long as Samuel led them. Years passed, and Samuel became old. He made his sons judges over Israel, but unlike Samuel, his sons were dishonest and took bribes. The people were unhappy and came to Samuel with a bold request. "We want a king to rule over us just like the other nations have." This made Samuel sad. He prayed to God, saying, "The people are rejecting me as their leader." But God replied, "They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me as their king. Do what they ask, but warn them what having a king will mean." Samuel called the people together and said, "If you choose to have a king, he will take your sons to serve in his army and fields. He will take your daughters to work for him. He will take the best of your crops and animals for himself. You will regret this decision." But the people insisted, "We want a king. We want to be like other nations." God told Samuel to give them what they wanted. "Listen to their voice and appoint a king for them," he said. In a small town in the tribe of Benjamin, there lived a young man named Saul. He was tall and handsome, taller than anyone else in Israel. One day, Saul's father, Kish, lost some donkeys and sent Saul and a servant to find them. They searched for days, but couldn't find the donkeys. Finally, Saul's servant said, "There's a man of God in this town. Let's ask him for help." The man they found was Samuel. God had already told Samuel, "Tomorrow I will send you a man from Benjamin. Anoint him as king over Israel." When Samuel saw Saul, God said, "This is the man I told you about." Samuel invited Saul to eat with him and later poured oil on his head. He said, "The Lord has chosen you to lead his people. You will save them from their enemies." Saul was shocked. "Why me?" he asked. "I'm from the smallest tribe in Israel." Samuel gathered all the tribes of Israel at Mizpah to publicly choose the king. Lots were cast, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen. Then the family of Kish was chosen, and finally Saul himself. But when they looked for Saul, he was nowhere to be found. He was hiding among the supplies, too nervous to come forward. The people brought him out, and Samuel said, "Here is the man the Lord has chosen. There is no one like him." The people shouted, "Long live the king!" Saul began his rule as Israel's first king. At first he was humble and listened to Samuel's guidance. The people were hopeful that Saul would lead them to victory and peace. Not long after Saul became king, a crisis arose in Israel. The Ammonites, a neighboring enemy, surrounded the town of Jabesh-Gilead. Their leader, Nahash, made a cruel demand. "If you want peace, each of you must let me gouge out your right eye. Then I'll let you live." The people of Jabesh-Gilead were horrified. "Give us 7 days to send for help," they pleaded. "If no one comes to rescue us, we'll surrender." Nahash agreed, thinking no one would save them. The messengers hurried to Saul's town and told everyone what had happened. When Saul heard the news, the Spirit of God came upon him, and he was filled with righteous anger. He cut up a pair of oxen into pieces and sent them throughout Israel with a warning. "This is what will happen to your oxen if you don't come and fight." The people rallied behind Saul. He gathered 330,000 men and led them into battle. They attacked the Ammonites at dawn and completely defeated them. The people of Jabesh-Gilead were saved, and Saul's leadership was celebrated. After the victory, some people said, "Let's punish those who doubted Saul could be king." But Saul replied, "No one will be punished today, for the Lord has rescued Israel." This moment united the Israelites, and they went to Gilgal to officially crown Saul as their king. They celebrated with sacrifices and rejoiced in God's deliverance. As Saul began his reign, Samuel addressed the people one last time as their judge. He said, "I have done my duty before you and God. Have I ever cheated or wronged anyone?" The people replied, "No, you have not wronged us or cheated us." Samuel continued, "The Lord has been faithful to you, but you have turned away from him many times. Now you have a king, as you asked. But remember, if you and your king follow God, he will bless you. If you turn away, his hand will be against you." To show God's power, Samuel called on the Lord, and a thunderstorm came, even though it was the dry season. The people were terrified and said, "Pray to the Lord for us, so we won't die." Samuel reassured them, "Don't be afraid. Serve the Lord with all your heart, and he will not abandon you. As for me, I will continue to pray for you and teach you the right way." Saul's reign started well, but trouble soon came. The Philistines gathered a massive army to fight Israel with thousands of chariots and soldiers. The Israelites were terrified and hid in caves, thickets, and even cisterns. Samuel had told Saul to wait 7 days for him to come and offer a sacrifice to seek God's favor. But as the days passed, Saul grew impatient. His army was shrinking as frightened soldiers ran away. On the 7th day, with Samuel still not there, Saul decided to offer the sacrifice himself. As soon as Saul finished, Samuel arrived. He was angry and said, "What have you done?" Saul replied, "The men were leaving, and you didn't come on time. I had to do it." Samuel said, "You acted foolishly. You did not obey God's command. Now your kingdom will not last. The Lord has chosen someone after his own heart to be king." Though Saul remained king, this was the beginning of his downfall. Saul's son, Jonathan, was a brave warrior. One day, he and his young armor-bearer decided to attack a Philistine outpost. Jonathan said, "Let's go. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can stop him from saving, whether by many or by few." The two of them climbed up a steep hill to the Philistine camp. Jonathan attacked, and his armor-bearer followed, defeating about 20 men. Panic spread among the Philistines, and even the ground shook. The Philistines began to flee. When Saul saw the confusion, he led his army into battle, and the Israelites won a great victory. But Saul made a foolish decision that day. He declared, "No one may eat until evening, so we can finish defeating our enemies." Jonathan, who hadn't heard his father's order, ate some honey he found in the forest. When Saul found out, he was ready to punish Jonathan, but the soldiers intervened. "Jonathan brought us this victory," they said. "He must not die." God gave Saul a clear command: attack the Amalekites and completely destroy everything they have, men, women, children, and animals. Leave nothing alive. This was a judgment on the Amalekites for their wickedness. Saul led his army and defeated the Amalekites, but he didn't fully obey. He spared their king, Agag, and kept the best sheep and cattle, claiming they were for sacrifices to God. When Samuel arrived, he was furious. "What is this bleating of sheep I hear?" he asked. Saul tried to explain. "I obeyed the Lord, but the people kept the best animals to sacrifice to him." Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in sacrifices as much as obeying his voice? To obey is better than sacrifice. Because you rejected God's command, he has rejected you as king." Samuel turned to leave. But Saul grabbed his robe, tearing it. Samuel said, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you and given it to someone better than you." Samuel then called for Agag and executed him, completing God's command. After this, Samuel never saw Saul again. He mourned for Saul, but God told him, "I have rejected Saul. It's time to anoint a new king." After God rejected Saul, he told Samuel to go to Bethlehem to anoint a new king. Samuel was nervous. "If Saul hears about this, he will kill me," he said. But God instructed him to take a sacrifice and invite Jesse, a man from Bethlehem, to the sacrifice. When Samuel arrived, Jesse brought his sons before him. The first son, Eliab, was tall and strong, and Samuel thought, "Surely this is the one the Lord has chosen." But God said, "Do not consider his appearance or height. People look at the outward appearance, but I look at the heart." Jesse brought 7 of his sons, but God did not choose any of them. Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse replied, "There is still the youngest David, but he is out tending the sheep." When David was brought in, he was young and handsome, but it was his heart that pleased God. The Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." Samuel poured oil on David's head, and from that day, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Not long after, the Israelites faced the Philistines again. The two armies camped on opposite hills, with a valley in between. The Philistines had a champion named Goliath, a giant over 9 feet tall. He wore heavy armor and carried a massive spear. Every day for 40 days, Goliath came out and mocked the Israelites, shouting, "Choose a man to fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be our slaves." King Saul and the Israelites were terrified. No one dared to fight Goliath. One day, Jesse sent David to the battlefield to bring food to his brothers, who were soldiers. When David arrived, he heard Goliath's challenge. "Who is this Philistine who dares to defy the armies of the living God?" David asked. His brothers scolded him, but David insisted he could fight Goliath. Saul heard about David and sent for him. David said, "Don't worry about this Philistine. I will fight him." Saul replied, "You're just a boy, and he's a warrior." But David said, "I've killed lions and bears while protecting my father's sheep. The Lord who saved me then will save me now." Saul gave David his armor, but it was too big and heavy. Instead, David took his sling and 5 smooth stones from a stream. He went out to meet Goliath. Goliath laughed when he saw David. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" David replied, "You come with a sword and spear, but I come in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today he will deliver you into my hands." David slung a stone that struck Goliath in the forehead. The giant fell face down, and David ran to him, took Goliath's sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines fled in fear, and the Israelites chased them, winning a great victory. After David's victory over Goliath, he became a hero in Israel. Saul made him a commander in the army, and David won many battles. The people loved him, and women sang, "Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed tens of thousands." This song made Saul furious. "They credit David with tens of thousands, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom?" From that day, Saul watched David closely. An evil spirit began to trouble Saul, and David was brought to play his harp to soothe him. But one day, Saul became so jealous that he threw his spear at David, trying to kill him. David dodged, but Saul's jealousy only grew. Saul even tried to trap David by offering him his daughter, Michal, in marriage. He thought, "I'll send David to fight the Philistines, and they will kill him." But David succeeded in every mission, and Saul's daughter fell in love with him. David married Michal, but Saul's hatred for him deepened. Saul told his son Jonathan and his servants to kill David, but Jonathan loved David and warned him, "My father is trying to kill you. Go hide, and I will talk to him." Jonathan spoke to Saul and said, "David has done nothing wrong. He risked his life to kill Goliath, and God gave Israel a great victory through him. Why would you harm an innocent man?" Saul listened and promised not to harm David, but his promise didn't last. Soon, Saul tried to kill David again. David fled to his house, but Saul sent men to watch him and kill him in the morning. Michal helped David escape by lowering him through a window. She placed an idol in his bed and told the men he was sick. When Saul discovered David was gone, he was furious. David fled to Samuel, and they stayed together in Ramah. David met with Jonathan and said, "What have I done? Why is your father trying to kill me?" Jonathan replied, "Never. My father tells me everything, and he would have told me this." But David insisted, "Your father knows we are friends. He's hiding his plans from you. I swear there's only a step between me and death." Jonathan said, "Whatever you want me to do, I will do." David devised a plan. "Tomorrow is the new moon festival. I will hide in the field, and if your father notices I'm not at the feast, tell him I asked to visit my family. If he is angry, you'll know he wants to kill me." Jonathan agreed and promised to warn David. He said, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship in the name of the Lord." At the feast, Saul noticed David's absence and became furious. When Jonathan defended David, Saul threw his spear at him. Jonathan left in anger and went to the field to warn David. The two friends wept and said goodbye. Jonathan said, "Go in peace. The Lord is witness between you and me and between your descendants forever." David fled from Saul and arrived in the town of Nob, where the tabernacle of the Lord was located. There, he met Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech was surprised to see David alone and asked, "Why are you here by yourself?" David, not wanting to reveal the truth about fleeing from Saul, said, "I'm on a secret mission from the king. My men are nearby and we need food. Do you have anything to eat?" Ahimelech replied, "I only have the consecrated bread from the tabernacle. It's meant for the priests, but if your men have kept themselves pure, they may eat it." David assured him they were pure, so Ahimelech gave him the bread. Then David said, "Do you have a weapon?" "I had to leave quickly and didn't bring my sword." Ahimelech said, "The only weapon here is the sword of Goliath, whom you killed." David took the sword, saying, "There is none like it." But nearby was a man named Doeg, one of Saul's servants, who saw everything. When Saul heard that David had been seen in Nob, he summoned Ahimelech and all the priests to confront them. "Why have you helped my enemy?" Saul demanded. Ahimelech replied, "David is your servant, loyal and brave. He has always done what you asked. How could I know he was fleeing from you?" But Saul, consumed by jealousy and rage, ordered his guards to kill the priests. The guards refused, fearing the Lord. Then Saul turned to Doeg, who had witnessed David's visit. Doeg carried out Saul's orders and killed 85 priests. He also attacked the town of Nob, killing its people and animals. One priest, Abiathar, escaped and fled to David. He told David what had happened. David was heartbroken and said, "I'm responsible for the deaths of your family. Stay with me, and I will protect you." David continued to hide in the wilderness, but news came to him that the Philistines were attacking the town of Keilah. David asked God, "Should I go and help them?" God answered, "Go, and you will save Keilah." David and his men attacked the Philistines and rescued the town. But when Saul heard David was in Keilah, he said, "God has delivered him into my hands, for he is in a town with gates and bars." David prayed again, asking God, "Will the people of Keilah hand me over to Saul?" God replied, "Yes, they will." So David and his men, now about 600 strong, left Keilah and moved from place to place to avoid Saul. David hid in the wilderness of Ziph, but the Ziphites betrayed him, telling Saul where David was. Saul pursued David relentlessly, but God protected him. At one point, Saul's army was closing in on David, but just as they were about to capture him, a messenger came to Saul, saying, "The Philistines are attacking." Saul broke off his pursuit to deal with the Philistines, giving David time to escape. David named the place the Rock of Escape, because God had saved him there. After dealing with the Philistines, Saul resumed his hunt for David. He took 3,000 men and searched the wilderness of En-Gedi, where David and his men were hiding in caves. One day, Saul entered a cave to rest, not knowing David and his men were deeper inside. David's men whispered, "This is your chance. God has delivered your enemy into your hands." David crept up to Saul and cut off a corner of his robe, but then David felt guilty. "The Lord forbid that I harm his anointed king," he said. David held back his men and let Saul leave the cave. After Saul left, David came out and called to him, "My lord the king." Saul turned and David bowed down. David said, "Why do you listen to those who say I want to harm you? Look, today the Lord gave you into my hands, but I spared your life. I could have killed you, but I will not harm the Lord's anointed." Saul was moved and said, "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. I know you will be king someday. Promise me you will not harm my family." David made the promise, and Saul went home. But David stayed in the wilderness, knowing Saul's jealousy would return. After Saul returned home, David and his men moved to the wilderness of Maon. In that area lived a wealthy man named Nabal, who owned many sheep and goats. Nabal was harsh and mean, but his wife, Abigail, was kind and wise. During the sheep shearing season, David sent some of his men to ask Nabal for food. "We've protected your shepherds and flocks while we've been in the wilderness. Could you please share some food with us?" they asked politely. Nabal replied rudely, "Who is this David? Why should I give my food and water to him?" When David heard this, he was furious. "Strap on your swords," he told his men. "We're going to teach Nabal a lesson." But one of Nabal's servants ran to Abigail and told her what had happened. "David's men were kind to us, but Nabal insulted them. Now David is coming to attack us." Abigail acted quickly. She loaded donkeys with food, bread, wine, roasted grain, and cakes of figs, and went to meet David. When she saw him, she bowed low and said, "Please don't pay attention to my husband Nabal. He's a fool, as his name means. I didn't see your men, or I would have helped them. Please accept this gift and forgive us. Don't let anger lead you to bloodshed." David was impressed by Abigail's wisdom. He said, "Praise God for sending you to stop me. You've kept me from doing something wrong." David accepted the food and turned back. When Abigail returned home, Nabal was holding a feast and was too drunk to listen to her. The next morning, Abigail told him what had happened. Nabal was so shocked that his heart failed, and he died 10 days later. When David heard the news, he said, "The Lord has repaid Nabal for his evil." He sent for Abigail and married her. Saul's jealousy flared up again. and he took 3,000 men to hunt David in the wilderness of Ziph. David and his men were hiding nearby and saw where Saul and his army were camped. That night, David and Abishai, one of his men, crept into Saul's camp. Saul and his soldiers were fast asleep, and his spear was stuck in the ground beside him. Abishai whispered, "This is your chance. Let me pin him to the ground with one strike." But David stopped him. We must not harm the Lord's anointed king. Let God deal with him in his own time. Instead, David took Saul's spear and water jug and left the camp. When they were at a safe distance, David called out to Saul's commander, Abner, "Why didn't you protect the king? Someone came into your camp to harm him. Look, here is the king's spear and water jug." Saul woke up and recognized David's voice. David said, "Why are you chasing me? What have I done? Look, I could have killed you, but I spared your life." Saul was moved again and said, "I have sinned. You are a better man than I. May you be blessed, David. You will do great things." But David knew Saul's heart wasn't truly changed. He went his way, and Saul returned home. David realized that as long as he stayed in Israel, Saul would keep hunting him. So he decided to go to the land of the Philistines, Israel's enemies. David and his 600 men, along with their families, went to Achish, the king of Gath. Achish welcomed David, thinking, "David must hate Saul and Israel now. He will be loyal to me." Achish gave David the town of Ziklag, where David and his men lived for over a year. During this time, David pretended to serve the Philistines, but secretly attacked their enemies, such as the Amalekites. He made sure no one was left alive to report back to Achish. When Achish asked, "Where did you raid today?" David would say, "Against the people of Judah," to make Achish believe he was fighting against Israel. Achish trusted David completely and even planned to make him his personal bodyguard, but David was cleverly avoiding harming his own people while building his strength. As the Philistines gathered their forces for a major battle against Israel, Saul was filled with fear. He prayed to God for guidance, but God did not answer him, neither through dreams, prophets, nor the Urim, a sacred tool used by priests. Desperate, Saul decided to seek out a medium, even though he had previously banned all such practices in obedience to God's law. Saul disguised himself and went to a woman in Endor who was known for summoning spirits. He said, "Consult a spirit for me and bring up the one I name." The woman hesitated. "You know Saul has outlawed this. Why are you trying to trap me?" Saul swore an oath. "No harm will come to you." He then asked her to summon the spirit of Samuel. When Samuel appeared, the woman was shocked and realized her visitor was Saul. "Why have you disturbed me?" Samuel's spirit asked. Saul replied, "I am in great distress. The Philistines are attacking, and God has turned away from me. What should I do?" Samuel said, "The Lord has departed from you because you disobeyed him. Tomorrow you and your sons will join me in death, and Israel will fall to the Philistines." Terrified, Saul fell to the ground. The woman urged him to eat something, and after much persuasion, he ate before returning to his camp. While Saul prepared for his final battle, David faced his own challenges. Achish, the Philistine king, planned to take David and his men into battle against Israel, but the other Philistine commanders objected. "What if David turns against us during the battle? He's the one they sing about. Saul has killed thousands and David tens of thousands," they argued. Reluctantly, Achish told David, "You have been loyal to me, but the other commanders don't trust you. You must return to Ziklag and stay out of the battle." David obeyed, though he likely felt relieved. He returned to Ziklag with his men, only to find disaster waiting for him. When David and his men arrived in Ziklag, they found the town burned to the ground. The Amalekites had raided while they were away, taking their wives, children, and belongings. David and his men wept until they had no strength left. Some of David's men were so angry that they talked about stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord. He prayed, "Shall I pursue the raiders? Will I overtake them?" God answered, "Pursue them. You will certainly overtake them and rescue everyone." David set out with 600 men, but 200 were too exhausted to continue and stayed behind. The others found an Egyptian slave who had been abandoned by the Amalekites. The man guided David to the Amalekite camp, where they were celebrating with their plunder. David and his men attacked and defeated the Amalekites. They rescued their families and recovered everything that had been taken. David even shared the plunder with the 200 men who had stayed behind, saying, "The share of those who stay with the supplies is the same as those who go into battle." This act of fairness strengthened David's bond with his men and showed his wisdom as a leader. Meanwhile, Saul and his sons faced the Philistines on Mount Gilboa. The battle was fierce, and the Israelites were overwhelmed. Saul's sons, including Jonathan, were killed. Saul himself was critically wounded by archers. Not wanting to be captured and humiliated by the Philistines, Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me." But the armor-bearer was too afraid, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor-bearer saw Saul was dead, he also took his own life. The Philistines found Saul's body the next day. They cut off his head and displayed his armor in their temple, mocking Israel. But brave men from Jabesh Gilead retrieved Saul's body and gave him a proper burial, remembering how he had once saved their town. Thus ended the reign of Saul, Israel's first king, and the stage was set for David to take the throne. After the battle on Mount Gilboa, David returned to Ziklag. On the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp. His clothes were torn, and he had dust on his head, a sign of mourning. The man fell at David's feet and said, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." David asked, "What happened? Tell me." The man replied, "The Israelites fled, and many were killed. Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." David pressed him for details, and the man claimed, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa. Saul was leaning on his spear, wounded, and he begged me to kill him to end his suffering. So I killed him and brought his crown and armband to you." David was horrified. He and his men tore their clothes in grief. They mourned and fasted for Saul, Jonathan, and the fallen Israelites. Then David said to the man, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand against the Lord's anointed?" David ordered one of his men to strike the messenger down, saying, "Your own words condemn you." That day, David composed a lament for Saul and Jonathan, known as the Song of the Bow. He sang, "How the mighty have fallen." Jonathan's love for me was wonderful, more than the love of women. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and death, they were not divided. After mourning Saul and Jonathan, David asked the Lord, "Should I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" God replied, "Go to Hebron." David went to Hebron with his family and his men. There the tribe of Judah anointed him as their king. David ruled over Judah for 7 years and 6 months. But Saul's commander, Abner, made Ishbosheth, Saul's son, king over the other tribes of Israel. This caused division, as the nation was now split between those loyal to David and those loyal to Ishbosheth. As time passed, there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. David grew stronger, while Ishbosheth's kingdom grew weaker. Abner, Saul's former commander, became frustrated with Ishbosheth. One day, Ishbosheth accused Abner of disloyalty. Offended, Abner said, "I will hand the kingdom over to David." Abner sent messengers to David saying, "Let's make an agreement, and I will bring all Israel under your rule." David agreed but demanded that his wife Michal, Saul's daughter, be returned to him. Michal was taken from her current husband and brought to David. Abner then met with the elders of Israel and persuaded them to support David. "You've wanted David as king for years," he said. "Now is the time." While Abner was working to unite Israel under David, two of Ishbosheth's men betrayed and killed him. They brought his head to David, expecting a reward, but David was furious. "You killed an innocent man in his own home," he said. He ordered the men to be executed, showing that he would not tolerate treachery. With Ishbosheth dead, the tribes of Israel came to David in Hebron. "We are your own flesh and blood," they said. "The Lord told you that you would shepherd his people and become their ruler." David was anointed king over all Israel, uniting the nation. He moved his capital to Jerusalem, which he captured from the Jebusites. Jerusalem became known as the City of David. David ruled for 40 years, 7 in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. After becoming king over all Israel, David wanted to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. The Ark, which symbolized God's presence, had been kept in the house of Abinadab for many years. David gathered 30,000 men and went to bring the Ark to the new capital. The Ark was placed on a cart pulled by oxen, and Abinadab's sons, Uzzah and Ahio, guided it. As the procession moved, David and the Israelites celebrated with songs, harps, tambourines, and cymbals. But suddenly, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out to steady the ark. The moment he touched it, God struck him dead, because the ark was holy, and no one was allowed to touch it. David was shocked and afraid. He said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" Instead of bringing it to Jerusalem, he left it in the house of Obed-Edom. For 3 months, the household of Obed-Edom was blessed because of the ark. When David heard of these blessings, he decided to bring the ark to Jerusalem properly. This time, the ark was carried by priests, as God had commanded. David danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a simple linen ephod. The people rejoiced, but not everyone was pleased. When David's wife Michal, Saul's daughter, saw him dancing, she was embarrassed. She said, "How the king of Israel has honored himself today, dancing like a fool." David replied, "I was dancing before the Lord who chose me over your father. I will celebrate him, and if I seem undignified, so be it." One day, after the ark was settled in Jerusalem, David said to the prophet Nathan, "Here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God is in a tent." Nathan initially told David to do whatever was in his heart, but that night, God gave Nathan a message. "Tell David, are you the one to build me a house? I have never lived in a house, but I have moved with my people in a tent. Instead, I will build you a house. Your kingdom and throne will last forever." Nathan delivered this message, and David was overwhelmed with gratitude. He prayed, "Who am I, sovereign Lord, that you have brought me this far? You are great, and there is no one like you. Let your name be praised forever." This promise from God pointed to the coming of the Messiah, who would be a descendant of David and reign forever. With God's blessing, David achieved great military victories. He defeated the Philistines, the Moabites, and the king of Zobah, expanding Israel's territory. He captured vast amounts of gold, silver, and bronze and dedicated them to the Lord. David also established justice and righteousness in his kingdom. He appointed capable officials, including Joab as commander of the army and Jehoshaphat as the recorder. Under David's leadership, Israel became a strong and prosperous nation. David remembered his promise to Jonathan to show kindness to his family. He asked, "Is there anyone left of Saul's house to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" A servant of Saul's family named Ziba told David about Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, who was crippled in both feet. David sent for Mephibosheth, who came before him in fear, bowing low. David said, "Don't be afraid. I want to show you kindness for your father Jonathan's sake. You will always eat at my table, and I will restore all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul." Mephibosheth was overwhelmed and said, "Who am I that you should show such kindness to me?" David treated Mephibosheth like one of his own sons, honoring the memory of his dear friend Jonathan. David wanted to show kindness to Hanun, the new king of the Ammonites, because Hanun's father had been kind to him. David sent messengers to express sympathy, but Hanun's advisors suspected the messengers were spies. They humiliated David's men by shaving off half their beards and cutting their clothes at the waist. When David heard this, he told his men to stay in Jericho until their beards grew back, but he was angry. The Ammonites realized they had made David an enemy and hired Aramean soldiers to help them. David sent Joab and his army to fight them. Joab cleverly divided his forces, and with God's help, Israel defeated the Ammonites and their allies. In the spring, when kings typically went to war, David stayed in Jerusalem while his army fought against the Ammonites. One evening, David was walking on the roof of his palace and saw a beautiful woman bathing. Her name was Bathsheba, and she was the wife of Uriah, one of David's soldiers. David sent for Bathsheba, and they committed adultery. When Bathsheba became pregnant, David tried to cover up his sin. He brought Uriah home from the battlefield, hoping he would spend time with his wife. But Uriah, being loyal to his comrades, refused to go home while the army was still fighting. Frustrated, David sent Uriah back to the battlefield with a letter instructing Joab to place him in the front lines, where the fighting was fiercest. Uriah was killed in battle, and David took Bathsheba as his wife. But God was displeased. God sent Nathan to confront David. Nathan told a story. There were two men in a town, one rich and one poor. The rich man had many sheep, but the poor man had only one lamb, which he loved like a daughter. One day, the rich man took the poor man's lamb to prepare a meal for a guest. David was furious. "The man who did this deserves to die," he said. Nathan replied, "You are the man. You took Uriah's wife and had him killed. Now trouble will come to your house." David was brokenhearted and said, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan told him God had forgiven him, but the child Bathsheba was carrying would die. The child became ill, and despite David's prayers and fasting, the baby died. Later, Bathsheba gave birth to another son, Solomon, whom God loved. David's family was torn apart by a terrible incident involving his children. Amnon, David's eldest son, became obsessed with his half-sister, Tamar, who was beautiful and kind. Amnon's obsession grew into something dark, and he confided in his cunning friend Jonadab. Jonadab suggested a deceitful plan. "Pretend to be sick," he said. "Ask your father to send Tamar to take care of you." Amnon followed this advice. When Tamar came to care for him, he forced himself on her, despite her pleading. "Don't do this terrible thing," she cried. "It's wicked, and it will bring shame on both of us." but Amnon ignored her. Afterward, Amnon's feelings turned to hatred. He drove Tamar out, leaving her devastated. Tamar tore her robe, put ashes on her head, and wept loudly. Her brother Absalom comforted her and said, "Stay with me. Don't let this destroy you." When David heard what had happened, he was furious but did nothing to punish Amnon. Absalom, however, nursed his anger in silence and began plotting revenge. 2 years later, Absalom invited all of David's sons to a feast. He instructed his servants, "When Amnon is drunk, kill him. Don't be afraid, I am giving the order." During the feast, Absalom's servants carried out his command, and Amnon was killed. The other sons fled in fear, thinking Absalom might harm them too. When word reached David, he was heartbroken, believing all his sons had been killed. But soon he learned only Amnon had died. Absalom fled to Geshur, where he stayed for 3 years. David mourned for Amnon but longed to see Absalom again. Despite his grief, David struggled to reconcile his duty as king with his love as a father. After 3 years, Joab, David's commander, convinced David to allow Absalom to return to Jerusalem. However, David refused to see him. For 2 years, Absalom lived in Jerusalem without meeting his father. Frustrated, Absalom set Joab's field on fire to get his attention. When Joab came, Absalom said, "Why did you bring me back if I can't see the king?" Joab arranged a meeting, and Absalom bowed before David. The king kissed him, signaling forgiveness. But Absalom's bitterness lingered. He began to undermine David's rule. He stood by the city gates and greeted those coming to seek justice from the king. "If only I were judge," he would say, "I would give you justice." Over time, Absalom won the hearts of the people. He declared himself king in Hebron, raising an army to overthrow David. When David heard of the rebellion, he fled Jerusalem with his loyal followers, leaving the city weeping. As David fled, he encountered both loyal friends and bitter enemies. Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, brought supplies for David and claimed Mephibosheth had betrayed him by staying in Jerusalem to support Absalom. David believed Ziba and gave him all of Mephibosheth's land. Later, a man named Shimei from Saul's family cursed David, throwing stones and shouting, "You are getting what you deserve. The Lord has given the kingdom to Absalom because of your sins." David's men wanted to kill Shimei, but David stopped them. "If God has told him to curse me, let him. Perhaps the Lord will see my suffering and repay me with good." Meanwhile, Absalom entered Jerusalem and took control. He followed the advice of Ahithophel, one of David's former counselors, further solidifying his claim to the throne. Ahithophel advised Absalom to attack David immediately, saying, "Let me take 12,000 men and strike him while he is weak. I will kill only David and bring the rest of the people back to you." But Absalom sought the advice of Hushai, a loyal supporter of David who was pretending to serve Absalom. Hushai said, "David and his men are fierce warriors. If you attack now, you will lose. Gather all of Israel and lead the attack yourself." Absalom chose Hushai's plan, giving David time to prepare. Hushai sent word to David through messengers, warning him to cross the Jordan River immediately. David and his followers escaped safely. Ahithophel, realizing his advice had been ignored and the rebellion would fail, took his own life. David's army, led by Joab, clashed with Absalom's forces in the forest of Ephraim. The battle was fierce, and 20,000 men were killed. As Absalom rode through the forest on his mule, his hair became tangled in the branches of a tree. He was left hanging, helpless. One of David's men saw Absalom and reported it to Joab. Joab rebuked the man for not killing him, but the soldier replied, "I would not harm the king's son, even for a reward. The king commanded us to protect him." Joab ignored David's orders and killed Absalom, thrusting 3 spears into his heart. Then he buried Absalom's body in a pit and covered it with stones. When news reached David, he was overcome with grief. He cried, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you." David's sorrow was so great that Joab had to confront him. "You are shaming your men who risk their lives for you. Go out and encourage them, or you will lose their loyalty." David pulled himself together and returned to his people. After Absalom's death, the nation was in turmoil. David's supporters wanted him to return to Jerusalem as king, but many tribes hesitated, unsure of their loyalty after supporting Absalom. To encourage reconciliation, David sent a message to the elders of Judah. "Why are you the last to bring me back as your king? You are my own flesh and blood." The tribe of Judah responded quickly and invited David to return. As David journeyed back, he encountered several individuals who had wronged or supported him during Absalom's rebellion. Shimei, who had cursed David, begged for forgiveness. David said, "You shall not die," and spared him. Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, came to meet David, explaining that Ziba had deceived him. David divided Saul's land between Ziba and Mephibosheth to settle the dispute. Barzillai, an elderly man who had supported David during his exile, came to bid farewell. David offered to care for him in Jerusalem, but Barzillai declined, asking that his servant Chimham go in his place. David agreed, showing gratitude for Barzillai's kindness. Though David's return was celebrated, tensions remained between the tribes of Israel and Judah, with arguments breaking out over who had the greater claim to the king. Not long after David's return, another rebellion arose. A man named Sheba from the tribe of Benjamin sounded a trumpet and declared, "We have no share in David, every man to his tent, O Israel." Many Israelites followed Sheba, leaving David's kingdom divided again. David acted quickly, telling his commander Amasa to assemble the army within 3 days. When Amasa failed to do so in time, David ordered Joab to pursue Sheba. Joab, still bitter about losing his position as commander, killed Amasa during the mission and took charge of the army. Joab and his forces chased Sheba to the city of Abel-Beth-Maachah. Joab's men prepared to destroy the city, but a wise woman called out from the walls, "Why are you attacking us? We are peaceful and faithful to Israel." Joab replied, "We are after Sheba, who has rebelled against the king. Deliver him to us, and we will leave the city in peace." The woman convinced the people to hand over Sheba. His head was thrown over the wall, and the rebellion ended. During David's reign, Israel suffered a 3-year famine. David prayed, asking God why this was happening. The Lord revealed that it was because Saul had broken Israel's treaty with the Gibeonites, killing many of them unjustly. David summoned the Gibeonites and asked, "What can I do to make amends so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" The Gibeonites replied, "We want no silver or gold from Saul's house, nor do we seek revenge on Israel. Let 7 of Saul's male descendants be given to us to be executed." David agreed, sparing Mephibosheth because of his covenant with Jonathan. The 7 men were handed over, and the Gibeonites executed them. After this, God answered Israel's prayers, and the famine ended. As David reflected on his life and reign, he composed a song of praise to the Lord, celebrating God's deliverance and faithfulness. The song echoed his gratitude for God's protection in battle and his guidance through trials. "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. He rescued me from my enemies even when I was overwhelmed. He trains my hands for battle and makes my feet like the feet of a deer. Who is God besides the Lord, and who is the rock except our God?" This song was a testimony to David's faith and trust in God throughout his life. David's final words were recorded as a declaration of God's covenant with him. "The Spirit of the Lord speaks through me. His word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has made an everlasting covenant with me, ordered and secure in every way." David also honored his mighty warriors, listing their heroic deeds. Among them were Josheb-Basshebeth, who killed 800 men in one battle; Eleazar, who stood his ground against the Philistines when others fled; Shammah, who defended a field of lentils from an enemy attack. These men were part of a group known as the 30, who supported David throughout his reign. Near the end of his reign, David made a critical mistake by ordering a census of Israel's fighting men. Joab, his commander, warned him, "Why does the king want to do this? May the Lord multiply your troops without the need for a count." But David insisted. After the census was completed, David realized his sin. He prayed, "I have sinned greatly, Lord. Take away my guilt." God sent the prophet Gad to David with a choice of punishment: 3 years of famine, 3 months of fleeing from enemies, or 3 days of plague. David chose the plague, saying, "Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great." The plague swept through Israel, killing 70,000 people. When the angel of the Lord reached Jerusalem, God relented and stopped the destruction. David built an altar on the threshing floor of Araunah, offering sacrifices to the Lord. The plague ended, and David learned the importance of humility and trust in God.